I'm going to show you absolutely everything you need to know in this ultimate guide for Blood Death Knights in Cataclysm Classic. We're going to start off now with races. I've put weeks of effort into researching and theory crafting this to make sure this is the best guide you're going to get for your class. Starting off with races then, if you are going Alliance, I always say that you should go human, and that is for a few reasons. One is diplomacy. Reputation gains are increased by 10%, and 2 of the enchants, and some actually pre-biz gear we're going to get, is from reputations in Cataclysm, and therefore having this racial bonus is going to give you some edge over everybody else. We are also axe, mace and sword wielders as a Death Knight, and we do have a sword and mace specialization as humans, meaning that we get a higher expertise on these weapon types. It is also very likely, with the drop pools, or the loot pools, should I say, in Cataclysm Classic, that we will be using a sword or even a mace. If you are going Horde, there's 2 main options I would recommend. One is Orcs. They have an axe specialization. They have Blood Fury, increasing your attack power on cooldown, and they also have Command. Damage dealt by Death Knight pets is increased. Doesn't matter as much in Blood as it does as in Holy or even Frost. However, still, it's an extra passive we can get. If you're wondering about Tauren and their endurance boost to stamina, it's actually on base health, so it isn't as attractive as you might first think. Another one you can go with is Troll. They have the Berserker cooldown, similar to Blood Fury. It increases your attack speed by 20% for 10 seconds. Again, not as useful as it is in the DPS specs, but still useful nonetheless. This is the stat priority that I would recommend you follow. Just making sure it says blood there and not unholy. Stamina is going to be the number 1, and you want to get to about 10,000 stamina, and that's where you're going to be really comfortable as a Blood Death Knight tanking. The second stat that you should be aiming to get is Mastery, and this is a new stat in Cataclysm that does something quite interesting for us as Blood Death Knights. You can see here, each time you heal with Death Strike while in Blood Presence, 2 things we're going to be doing quite often as a tank. You gain 83% of the amount healed as a damage absorption shield. Each point of mastery increases that shield by 6.25%, which is quite large, I think you'll agree. After that, we're going to want dodge rating and then parry rating in that order. And then after that, we're just going to go for anything else. Now coming into game, we're going to have a look at the talents, glyphs, and the overall rotation. While I'm going through the talents and glyphs, if you are starting to get a tad confused about the complexity of it, don't worry. I'm going to be going through all the spells and what they do and how we're going to use them in the rotation part. We're of course putting most of our talents into blood, as we are a Blood Death Knight. Starting off at the top with Bladed Armour. It's going to increase our attack power by an amount of our armour. Secondary is Blade Barrier, where we just take 6% less damage. Onto the second row, Improved Blood Tap reduces the cooldown of our Blood Tap ability. This is this one down here. Immediately activates a Blood Rune and converts it into a Death Rune. If you're not sure what a Death Rune is, if we look to the top left of my screen here, you can see we have Runic Power up to 130, and we have 2 Blood, 2 Frost, and 2 Unholy runes. When I use Blood Tap, you can see I've turned a Blood Rune into Death Rune, and the Death Rune can actually be used as a Blood, Frost, or Unholy rune. Some of our abilities, let's take our Rune Tap here, requires 1 Blood Rune, meaning that if we have, say, no Blood Runes available, but we have a Death Rune, we can actually still use the Blood Tap. It can basically be used as any type of rune. And this talent is reducing the cooldown on that ability. Then we have Scent of Blood. You've got a 15% after dodging, 15% chance, or parrying, or taking direct damage to gain the Scent of Blood effect, causing your next 3 melee hits to generate 10 runic power. That again is our main resource here that we're going to be generating and then spending. Lastly, we've got Scarlet Fever here. Causes your Blood Plague to afflict enemies with Scarlet Fever, reducing their physical damage dealt. And that generally is of course going to be to you because you are the tank. FYI then, at this point, I want to show you something else. We have 2 diseases or plagues, you can call them. Using Icy Touch and Plague Strike here, you can see, let's go on to a different one where there's not loads of people. You can see that when I use these 2 abilities, we get Frost Fever, melee and ranged attack speed reduced, and Blood Plague where they suffer damage, as well as the Scarlet Fever we just spoke about, reducing their damage dealt. So we have a few diseases we're going to put onto our target. And basically, when you put your Blood Plague on your target, they're also going to get that Scarlet Fever effect. Then we've got Toughness, increasing your armor value, Bone Shield, a cooldown I'm going to speak about in the rotation part. Sanguine Fortitude, your Icebound Fortitude reduces damage taken by an additional amount and costs no runic power to activate. That is this cooldown here. It's on a 3-minute cooldown. The Death Knight freezes his blood to become immune to stun effects and reduce all damage taken by 50% for 12 seconds. A really standard damage reduction cooldown there. Blood Parasites, charming, I know. Your melee attacks have a 10% chance to spawn a Bloodworm. The Bloodworm attacks your enemies, gorging itself with blood until it bursts to heal nearby allies. And that is just a passive effect that will be happening as we're fighting. You can see on the floor here, there is a Bloodworm engorging itself on the target dummy's blood, apparently. We've got improved blood presence here, increasing your rune regen by 20%, reducing the chance that you'll be critically hit by melee attacks while in blood presence. In addition, while in frost presence or undead, we get some benefits. We don't care about that. Down here, next to my camera, just on the right here, you will see there's a blood, frost, and unholy presence. These are like stances we can have. As a tank and as a blood death knight, we are going to be in blood presence at all times. You assume the presence of blood, increasing stamina by 8%, armor contribution by 55%, and reducing damage taken by 8%. Increases your threat generated as well. And that there is making us a lot more tanky. Going on to the final 3 rows, we have Rune Tap, converts a blood rune into 10% of your maximum health. A little kind of easy way to get some health back there. And then Will of the Necropolis. When a damaging attack brings you below 30% health and your maximum of your maximum health, the cooldown on your Rune Tap ability, which is the one I've just spoken about, is refreshed, and your next rune tap has no cost. Basically, when you get to low health, it goes, uh-oh, the cooldown is reduced and you can use it for free to regenerate some health. And all damage taken is then going to be reduced for 8 seconds. But it can only happen every 45 seconds. We've also got Vampiric Blood, another defensive cooldown, increasing the amount of health the Death Knight receives from any healing spells and effects by 40% for 10 seconds. Improved Death Strike down here, increasing the damage done by that spell, increasing its critical strike chance and the amount it heals. And then lastly, Dancing Rune Weapon, more on that shortly. A few other points we're going to put into Unholy and Frost. 3 out of 3 into Runic Power Mastery. Normally we have 100 Runic Power. With this talent, you can see up here, we've got 130. 2 out of 2 into Icy Reach, increasing the range of our Icy Touch, Chains of Ice, and Howling Blast. A few of our spells. And Lichborn. Draw upon unholy energy to become undead for 10 seconds. While you're immune to Charm, Fear, and Sleep effects. Lastly, 3 out of 3 into Epidemic, increasing the duration of our Blood Plague, and Frost Fever by 12 seconds. That is the 2 diseases I spoke about earlier. Then going on to what glyphs we're going to use. For prime glyphs, we've got Death Coil, increasing the damage and healing done of it. Heart Strike, increasing the damage done of it. Rune Strike, increasing the critical strike chance of it. And if you're thinking, I don't know these abilities yet, again, don't worry, we're going to go through them all fully in the rotation. For Major, our Vampiric Blood, increasing the bonus healing received while it's active. Remember that what Vampiric Blood does is it increases the health you're going to receive from any healing effects, etc. And an additional 15%, but it no longer grants you any health. So it won't grant you health, but it will increase the healing effects you receive. Lastly, Rune Tap, it also heals your party for 5% of their maximum health, which is amazing. On our minor ones, we have Glyph of the Horn of Winter, increasing the duration of it. Blood Tap, where it no longer causes damage. And your Death Grip ability, if it fails because the target is immune, the cooldown is reset. So on Death Grip, it's a really great way. I'm just going to put it on my bar here. Basically, I can't even use it on the dummies, but you harness the Unholy Energy to basically drag the target toward you. If the target is immune then, with that Glyph, say if you didn't realise the target's immune, and you're like, oh no, I've wasted it, the cooldown will be reset with that rune, which I think is quite useful. Especially if a mob has gone awry, you need to pull it back, etc. This is really good as a tank. So how is this all going to come together into our actual rotation? Well, let's start off then with the single target rotation. The first spell we have here is Outbreak. You can see it's on a 30-second cooldown, and that's going to instantly apply Blood Plague and Frost Fever to the enemy. These are our 2 diseases. Don't forget, we also have Scarlet Fever being afflicted by our Blood Plague, reducing the damage our target deals. And that is from our talent, Scarlet Fever, up here. We want to maintain these diseases on our target at all times. You can either do it with your Outbreak, which is on a 30-second cooldown, and as you can see, they will last just over 30 seconds at the moment for me, meaning you can just use your Outbreak on cooldown. If not, you can use Icy Touch to basically apply Frost Fever, and Plague Strike to apply Blood Plague and Scarlet Fever. We then have our Death Strike. It uses 1 Frost and 1 Unholy Rune to use, and it does a lot of damage and does a lot of threat generation. Reading the tooltip unleashes a powerful strike that heals you for 20% of the damage done, or should I say, sorry, the damage done to you. in the last few seconds. That's a minimum of at least 7% of your maximum health, while also dealing 330% of weapon damage plus X amount to an enemy if the attack is successful. Basically, it does a ton of damage, heals you, and it generates a high amount of threat. Don't forget with our mastery, every time we heal with Death Strike, we are going to get that absorption shield as well. So it not only heals you, but it will actually give you the absorption effect whenever you heal with this ability. It's one of our most important heals. It's the best way to get health back and get that absorb shield up from our mastery, and should be utilised fully because of these effects. The next one we have is Heart Strike. We're going to use this to spend our blood runes. Instantly strike the target and up to 2 additional nearby enemies, causing weapon damage plus X amount on the primary target, with each additional enemy struck dealing less damage than the previous target, Damage dealt to each target is increased by an additional 15% for each of your diseases present, which of course we should have up on all of our targets. One thing I will mention is that when you use Outbreak, Icy Touch or Plague Strike to apply those diseases, if there is multiple targets, you can use this spell here, Pestilence, and this is going to spread those diseases to nearby targets. You can see I've just used it and it's now on the other target dummy as well. One thing to note, if both of your blood runes, as you can see here, are on cooldown, so let's use them both here. They're both on cooldown. Of course, we could still use Heart Strike because we have some death runes. Remember that death runes are actually going to be able to be used as any rune at all. I don't want you to use your your Heart Strike. I don't want you to use Heart Strike if your 2 blood runes are on cooldown. I want you to save your death runes to use your Death Strike with, because that's your healing and your most important ability. So we're using our Death Strike with Frost, Unholy, or Death runes. We're only using Heart Strike for our blood runes. Lastly, we have our Rune Strike, and this is basically how we're going to spend our runic power. Strike the target for weapon damage plus X amount, only usable in blood presence or for 10 seconds after the Death Knight dodges or parries. It causes a high amount of threat. And basically, that is just what you're going to be using to spend your runic power. And that is the main rotation for single target. The only other thing you should do is use your Death and Decay here. On cooldown, corrupts the ground, causing damage to everyone in it, and also generates a high amount of threat. Regarding the AoE rotation, we are going to also use Death and Decay on cooldown, put out an Outbreak, and then spread it with Pestilence to all nearby enemies. Use your Death Strike, as we've discussed before. And then for our blood runes, we can use Blood Boil, boiling the blood of all enemies within 10 yards, dealing shadow damage, dealing additional damage to targets, again, infected by your Blood Plague or Frost Fever. This is generally if you're dealing with a lot of enemies, where if it's only 1, 2, or 3 enemies, we can use our Heart Strike still, because remember, it's going to hit 3 targets. Anything above 3 targets, use your Blood Boil. Outside of that, using Rune Strike again to spend runic power in a multi-target scenario. Now we're going to look at some of our cooldowns. We have the Dancing Rune Weapon here on a 1.5 minute cooldown, summoning a second rune weapon that fights on its own, mirroring your attacks, and assisting in defense of its master, granting an additional 20% parry chance when it's active. Because of the parry chance, if you know that you're about to get hit by a massive damaging attack, this is when you should be using your Dancing Rune Weapon. You could also swap out one of your glyphs in the major category, potentially your Glyph of Anti-Magic Shell if you don't need the higher duration, and put Glyph of Dancing Rune Weapon on there, increasing your threat generation while it's active. That is a different choice that you could make, and that is up to you. Then we have Army of the Dead, and although this may look like a damage cooldown, it actually has some survivability baked into it as well. Summons an entire legion of ghouls to fight for the Death Knight. The ghouls will swarm the area, taunting and fighting anything they can. While channeling, the Death Knight takes less damage equal to his dodge and parry, plus parry chance, which is a massive damage reduction. Secondly, they're also going to taunt your enemies, taking those enemies off you. So it's going to reduce your damage taken, and it's also going to mean that their ghouls are actually taunting your enemies, reducing, of course, the chance that you yourself will be attacked. We also have Empower Rune Weapon on a 5 minute cooldown, activating all of your runes and generating runic power. I would say if you do happen to be at a point where you need to use a lot of death strikes, getting your health back, etc., with the healing on there, that would be a great time to use your Empower Rune Weapon to get those runes back. And lastly, Bone Shield. It's only on a 1 minute cooldown, and as you can see here, we have 6 stacks of it. Damage taken reduced by 20%, damage dealt increased by 2%. Surrounds you with a barrier of whirling bones, begins with 6 charges, and each damaging attack consumes a charge. While at least 1 charge remains, you take 20% less damage, etc. Because it is only on a 1 minute cooldown, and the 6 charges, if you can see on my buffs on the top right screen, last for 5 minutes, you can put this up before you go into combat, meaning that you can get those charges when you go into combat, they all drop off, and if you've waited a minute, you can then actually get immediately another 6 stacks as soon as they all fall off, because the cooldown would have already come off when you're in combat, which is quite a sneaky little tip there. We've also got our rune tap, which we've already spoken about, converting a blood rune into health for you and your party due to the glyph we have. Vampiric blood, which will no longer heal you, but will increase your healing received. Icebound fortitude, reducing damage taken. Death pact is one we haven't spoken about. Sacrifice as an undead minion, healing the Death Knight for 25% of his maximum health. We do also have Raise Dead here, which we can use with that if we wish, raising a ghoul to fight for you that lasts a minute. We can then sacrifice it with Death Pact, healing you. Blood tap, activating a blood rune and converting it into a death rune. Fantastic if you need to use your death strike, for example. An anti-magic shell, surrounding the Death Knight in an anti-magic shell, absorbing magical damage dealt from spells up to a maximum of 50% of your health. Another great cooldown. A few other little things. Dark Command is an 8-second cooldown, and this is your taunt, making the target attack you. We've got Horn of the Winter. You can see it's up for 3 minutes. This is going to increase the strength and agility of you, your party, and your raid. Keep this up at all times. Mind Freeze on a 10-second cooldown is your interrupt, so you can interrupt a target spellcasting. And Strangulate does the same thing, but it's on a 2-minute cooldown. Only other thing to mention is something we've already spoken about, which is make sure that you're in Blood Presence. And apart from that, that forms the main rotation for a Blood Death Knight. Now let's have a look at all of the extra things we're going to be doing, like Consumables, Professions, and Reputations, which actually in Cataclysm Classic make a big difference. Starting off, you can see above me, we've got the 2 reputations here, Arcanum of the Earthen Ring and the Greater Inscription of Unbreakable Quartz. Basically, you need to get your reputation up with the Earthen Ring in Vashir and also Pharazane and Deepholm to get this head and shoulder enchant. Now, I have done reputation guides. I'll put them in the description for you. You can watch them after this video if you'd like to find out the quickest way to get these reputations up. Regarding the gems you're going to need, Bold Inferno Ruby I think is best for red slots. On yellow slots, Fine Ember Topaz, adding parry and mastery. And the Puissant Dream Emerald in your blue slots, adding mastery and stamina. For your meta gem, I would go for the Austere Shadow Spirit Diamond, adding stamina and 2% increased armor value. If you're talking about the rune, for your rune forging as a Death Knight, the rune of Sword Shattering is going to be the one you want as blood, increasing your parry chance by 4% and increasing the duration of any disarm effects by 60%. Regarding professions, I would advise alchemy. That's when you're going to get this mixology effect. This is going to grant you an extra 191 stamina on your flask, assuming you're taking the stamina flask. On the rings, you can add greater stamina on each ring with enchanting as well, meaning you can get an extra 120 stamina from taking enchanting. For the actual consumables then, Flask of Steel Skin, increasing stamina by 450. That is without the mixology bonus, by the way. Earthen Potion, increasing your armor for 25 seconds as the potion you can use, along with a mythical healing potion if needed. And Lava Scale Minestrone is going to increase your mastery and stamina for an hour and is the food you should use. And that sums up how to play Blood Death Knight in Cataclysm Classic. If you've got any more questions about how to play the spec, feel free to either leave a comment below or join my Discord, where I'm happy to try and help as many people as I possibly can, along with my helpful community that are also there for you if needed in the Discord. If you would like to support the channel, especially with so many people now using ad blocks, etc. on YouTube, I do only do this in my part-time, and my main way of actually making kind of any income from this is generally Patreon. I really, really appreciate it if you would consider joining. You get a lot of behind-the-scenes videos, written guides that are Patreon only, and Excel spreadsheets, as well as my LVUI profile that's really minimalist that people seem to like. That's all on my Patreon as well as a VIP channel in Discord where you can ask me questions, etc. Is as a priority, just in case you would like to support the channel. If you are looking for other specs, whether it's Death Knight or other classes, click this playlist here because I've done every single class guide for Cataclysm Classic. I have been very, very busy for the few weeks leading up to Cataclysm, getting these all done for you so that they're available on launch. So enjoy, have fun in Cataclysm Classic, and I hope this again was useful for you.